Hello, everybody. Welcome into the BettingPros podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Terrell Furman Jr. We have a bracket, Terrell. We can now look at the NCAA tournament 2025. We know the teams that are in. We know where they are seated. We know where they're playing. And we can start filling out those brackets. One of the most fun stretches of days of the entire year is just tinkering with my bracket and really struggling to decide who's going to be in my Final Four, which usually happens most years. How are you doing today, buddy?
Oh, I'm good. I'm great. My VCU Rams won the A10. Shout out to the home team VCU for being able to get that done. I I like the draw. Getting a BYU team that's riding hot. They know that they can shoot, but they haven't seen a defense like VCU. So I'm one. I love the mid majors, and one of my favorite parts of the tournament is seeing what mid major decides to make the dance and make this interesting for us.
Speaking of mid-majors, I promised we were going to look at this from a non-homer view for most of the show. I have to ask my Maryland Terrapins, we were just talking about a little bit before we started recording. They're facing a mid-major in that 4-13 game. They get Grand Canyon. What are your immediate thoughts on that one?
Oh, be careful, Maryland. This is a Maryland team that has a good amount of tournament appearances and not a good amount of wins here. And Grand Canyon, you talked about it in pre-production. Grand Canyon's fans travel really well, and so we'll see how that goes. But man, from a Grand Canyon team that I think can do it all, and that has the ability to put up a lot of offense and really really lock down defensively, Maryland may be in trouble, just maybe.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I feel like Memphis is a pretty decent 5 to get as a 4. I know a lot of places had them seated a bit lower, so we'll see if they even get to that point, having to get past Grand Canyon. I do want to let everybody know that we have a pick'em contest here going on. If you think you know college hoops, take your bracket knowledge to the next level with the brand new NCAA tournament pick'em contest sponsored by FanDuel. Pick your winners or make your predictions against the spread all tournament long for a chance to win up to $1,000 in FanDuel DFS credits, signed jerseys, and free annual BettingPros subscriptions. The best part is it's completely free to enter. You can enter now at bettingpros.com/contests. All right, Terrell, let's start off with the really main conversation that you see every year at this point, right after the selection show, which is the teams that didn't make it and who are the biggest snubs in your opinion. And not only who are the biggest snubs, but who would you take out to make room for them?
I mean, I think this year it's not even the conversation of what teams didn't make it. It's the conversation of what team did make it that took something out, because North Carolina is in the field. And as somebody who, yes, I do like the North Carolina Tar Heels, coming down to the North Carolina area. I've been around here a few, and you kind of end up picking loyalties one way or another when you frequent around North Carolina too much. I question them against the best teams. Everybody talks about the quad one win record and all of that. And yeah, they got a little bit of hot playing the bottom of the barrel of the ACC. But the question mark is how do you judge the ACC? Because they were very, very lukewarm in a down ACC conference, and they made it in the tournament. And if you told me Indiana got that spot, I wouldn't have been surprised. If you told me Boise got that spot, I wouldn't have been surprised. I think Boise is the team that I look at, and I'm like, oh, I really wish we kind of get to see that team in the tournament. But North Carolina making it in, I think that's the one that everybody's confused at. And now that they're in there, they might win a game, maybe two.
I was going to say not only Carolina is the obvious one, you're right about that, but those two teams you mentioned were the two that I was thinking would have a chance over Carolina in Indiana and Boise. So in lockstep with you on that. Was there any seeding snubs in your opinion? Any teams that, like, yes, we knew they were going to get in, but you thought they were lower, or the other version, teams you thought were higher than they should have been seeded when you look at the bracket?
I think the ending of the Big Ten title game was rather interesting. You had Michigan come in as a 5 seed, I believe, and granted, Michigan looked horrible to start the regular season, but they got red hot when they needed to and won the Big Ten tournament. And then you had that Wisconsin team who I believe was ranked a 3. Is that where
they're
yeah.
3? They were the 12th team on the S curve. Yeah, there were 3.
Yeah, so I'm like, 3 for that Wisconsin team that struggles. Like you saw it in the Big Ten title game. That Wisconsin team struggles down the stretch of games. They will have you in the game, have you in the game, have you in the game. When you get to the final 3 minutes, 4 minutes of basketball, it looks really, really bad on offense. And honestly, what it looks like is a lot of just, hey, figure out somebody shoot the ball and hopefully it goes in, and not a whole bunch of, hey, let's make this set. Let's do the things that were working for us all the way up to this point, Wisconsin kind of melts down in games. So the fact of seeing Wisconsin as a 3, I thought they were overseeded, and definitely going to be a team that I'm looking out to go ahead and get them out of the water early.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, really, like Michigan, I get it. You mentioned some of the struggles they had at various points in the season, but I think you could make at least a cogent case that they should have been seated higher than Wisconsin, who was a 3. Purdue and Maryland were both 4s. I mean, Michigan just beat Maryland yesterday. Obviously, Maryland beat them at their place too earlier in the season. I don't think Purdue's resume is all that exciting. Like I was surprised to see Michigan at a 5, given some of the metrics and particularly how they finished the season. We see it a lot of years, though. That Big Ten championship game often doesn't matter because it's so late in the process. The bracket is typically made. So unless that's a team that's going to steal a bid and they have to leave open that contingency, you often see it not impact seeding maybe as much as it should. I know that's, like, as a Big Ten guy, Maryland, I know that's something that people kind of often talk about amongst the fandom. Are there any teams that just kind of in this early conversation, Terrell, you think people aren't really talking about enough?
Yeah, Wofford. I hate that the Wofford team got Tennessee as the first draw, and that's really, really tough. Maybe they're a team that I'm looking to bet on against the spread and not necessarily move them along in my bracket. But that Wofford team, man, I mean, they are completely hot coming into this tournament from 3. They're shooting 40%, 41%, 50% from 3 in the 3 games that it took them to win the SoCon championship. Their offense is simple. We're either going to shoot up a bunch of threes or we're going to get those easy percentage chances at the rim. And Corey Tripp, Justin Bailey, and they got a freshman, Luke Flynn. They're all shooting better than 35% from the field. Bailey's all the way up to like 45% from the field from 3. So both, like, Wofford has a whole lot of offense, and I was like, man, any team is gonna really, really be nervous. And then I see Tennessee come across the board, and I'm like, not that team. That's a really, really good team. So I really am looking at at Wofford still. Maybe I'll bet on them instead of move them along in the brackets. But that was a really, really tough draw. And then my VCU Rams. This isn't really a lot of like homerism, at least I don't think for me with VCU, but they're a really, really good defense. They have a player that I think could be one of those darling players that people talk about in the tournament in Matt Shulga that can go out there and score on all 3 levels and be really, really good energy guy for them and their best player. So VCU, if they get past that BYU team and the hot 3-point shooting that they have, and VCU makes that defense and makes them play down to their pace, their level, and hey, this is a grinded out defensive game, yeah, VCU can make a run, and then they're going to play that Wisconsin team that we just talked about potentially in the next round. So if you're telling me that VCU gets BYU and Wisconsin and moves on to the Sweet 16, I wouldn't be surprised.
I like VCU a lot. I always wonder when a team, like a mid-major team, has a coach that is getting lots of looks at maybe moving up to a higher level. And I know there's been some talk that like Ryan Odom is going to be the next guy at UVA, maybe. I know Villanova, I've at least seen one reporter say they could be interested in him. So I always wonder if a team is going to feel just like a little bit distracted when they go into the tournament, and that's kind of hanging over the team. But I'm with you. I think VCU is a good team. I think he's a good coach. Obviously, we know what he can do in the tournament, given what he did at the UMBC several years ago. So I think they're a good call as well. I do want to let everybody know that if you want to build the perfect bracket and take down your pool, you can use the free bracket optimizer, at bettingpros.com/bracket. Again, that's the free bracket optimizer at bettingpros.com/bracket. You can optimize your picks using advanced data and betting odds, lock in your favorites, and we'll do the rest for you. Find key matchups and smart upset picks instantly. Make your best bracket at bettingpros.com/bracket. All right, we're going to go region by region, but before we do, I do just want to quickly highlight how strong these 1 seeds are this year, Terrell. It is ridiculous. If you look at KenPom, there have been this century, I think it's 4 teams that have had an overall net rating above plus 35 on KenPom prior to this year. There are 4 this year alone, and it, of course, is the 4 1 seeds. Duke is number 1 in KenPom, Florida number 2, Houston number 3, Auburn number 4. Every one of those teams has a net rating over plus 35. Even a team like Tennessee, who you just mentioned, is a really good team. They're the 5th team on KenPom this year, and they're plus 31 on KenPom. It is ridiculously strong, and that trickles down to it's very deep as well. I mean, again, I've been following Maryland a lot this year. They're plus 26.35. That would be easily a top 10 team in most years. They're 12th in KenPom this year. That's just one example. Very, very, very strong at the top this year. When you look at these 4 1 seeds, do any of them stand out to you as being susceptible to an early loss in this tournament, or are they just so good that we should be penciling them into our Final Four pretty much right off the bat?
Penciling in, I don't know. We'll see what Duke looks like. Duke has a lot of injuries, and we're going to have to see what this Duke team looks like going forward. And maybe that's something that says, okay, maybe Duke could beat had, because now you're having lineup changes. You're doing things that you didn't do over the course of the regular season because you always had Cooper Flagg, because you always had Malik, because you always had all these players that you never really had to play around with the lineup, especially in crunch time. And I think that's the part that could really get Duke, because if you go back to the beginning of the season, yes, this Duke team grew over time, but that early beginning of the season, how young this team is, that really showed up in crunch time. And I think that's something that I always kind of checked in the back of my head, like, hey, when they get in crunch time, sometimes they do fold. So maybe a Duke team like that, I could see them becoming one of the teams that kind of goes down, especially how everybody talked about how down the ACC is, and they kind of ran through this ACC. Maybe there's a little bit of bias of how Duke's been playing recently. But I see Duke that probably be my number one just to go down. But that's just because of the continuity of, hey, they got some injuries here. There may be some changes, some tinkering to the lineup. And you don't want to do stuff like that when you get to the biggest tournament all year.
It feels like Duke certainly has the talent, right? Florida playing as well as any team in the country. Auburn at times has played as well as any team in the country. They obviously have, Johni Broome, possible player of the year as well. So Houston is kind of the one that stands out to me. Not necessarily even to knock Houston, because I think they're a really good team, obviously, but having to face Gonzaga potentially in that second round, who was also a top 10 KenPom team. And you get why Gonzaga might have been seeded where they were, but in terms of the metrics, a very, very strong team as well. So maybe kind of a tough road for Houston there, at least certainly in the second round. Let's start going region by region, Terrell. We'll start with where the number one overall seed is. That is Auburn in the South. We don't yet know they'll be facing a 16 seed. We'll see which one it ends up being. The 8-9.
It's going to be Alabama State. Let me just go ahead and give you that now. It's going to be Alabama State. Let's go on, SWAC.
You're locking that one in already. So Auburn will be facing Alabama State, as you say. Louisville Creighton is the game in the 8-9. Louisville playing in Kentucky, so definitely a location advantage for them. Just to read through the whole region, Michigan is the 5 going up against UC San Diego. Texas A&M is the 4 going up against Yale. Ole Miss is the 6 seed. Obviously, we're waiting to see who they face in that 11 game. Iowa State is the 3. Lipscomb is the 14. Marquette at 7. New Mexico at 10. And the Michigan State at 2. And Bryant at 15. When you look at this just from Auburn's perspective, do you think this is a tough draw for the number one overall seed? Do you think it's a fair draw? Do you think they maybe have a relatively easy pass? What's your initial reaction for Auburn?
I think it's all right. I think it's relatively fair. I think the 8-9 matchup is always going to be interesting. In this side of the bracket, Iowa State, I think that is the one that you're really concerned about. And unfortunately, I believe one of the guards for Iowa State isn't going to be able to play in the tournament. And so that's one of the teams I was looking at that I said, man, Iowa State I think is seeded a little low just because of a couple losses they took towards the end of the season at 3. I think that they probably could play to the level of a 1 or a 2, to be honest, and they're all the way down there at 3, and then you're getting that with the Auburn side of the bracket. And I still think even with injury, man, Curtis Jones for Iowa State is a baller. Like, he's one of the guys that I think of when I think, hey, who's going to be that person that kind of takes over the tournament and makes everybody shine, and everybody's looking at them and they're talking about him from weekend to weekend. Like, I think he really is one of those type of players where he could average some 20-plus points over the course of the tournament for Iowa State. So, I think that's really the big concern for me. Iowa State, and then, of course, they get Izzo in Michigan, and it's been a while since Izzo's been able to be Izzo in March, and he's had that roster together. So I think that this could be one of the years where that makes this confusing for an Auburn team and make things tough.
There's good players in every region. Obviously, this is a region, though, that has a number of players that I think could become they're all very good already and stars to certain levels, but guys who I think could really kind of explode on the national scale. Obviously, we already know Broome at Auburn, and you just mentioned Iowa State, but Cam Jones with Marquette, Jace Richardson, the freshman at Michigan State, Michigan's 2 big men. There's a lot of Chucky Hepburn at Louisville. There's a lot of really good players in this region, right?
Yeah, man, it's a lot. Like I think this is a good one. If I had to go with a pick here, I think I am sticking. I really, really want to move Iowa State into the Final Four here. I really do, but I think the injury is just too much. I don't know what they're going to be able to do about Johni Broome, but Iowa State does do a really, really good job of clogging up the lanes and clogging up the inside, making you shoot 3-point shots. And so I think it'll be a good game if you get an Auburn and an Iowa State or Iowa State and a Michigan down there in the lower part of the bracket. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna stick with the 1 seed here, though. I'm gonna go Auburn.
Do you have a favorite underdog in this region?
Hmm. Let's see here. I could see a Yale and Texas A&M is going to be a good game.
I was thinking in
I
terms
think
of the
that's
first round, Yale might be a good choice. Maybe Marquette. I like Cam Jones a lot.
who's the guy from Yale who I can never pronounce his name.
Oh,
He is a
I'm not gonna try to
baller.
pronounce it. Yeah,
I can never pronounce his name, but he's a baller. Pula, whatever his
yeah.
name is. He's oh my gosh, he's a hooper. So I think and the Yale team has been through a lot of turnover, and they're still really really good. So, yeah, man, I could see a Yale team going, and then that would only like bring this whole SEC is the best conference, and they're gonna get all these teams. And like we've seen so many times, it was one year. I don't know if it was last year with the Big Ten or the year before with the Big Ten, but the Big Ten had a whole bunch of teams, and like half of them were
Yeah.
out in the first weekend. Like sometimes you see really good basketball, really good competitive basketball in a conference, and you assume that that conference is dominant over everybody else, and they always aren't so. So yeah, I think a Yale team is fun. I think that UC San Diego team against Michigan is also really, really interesting as well. And so I'd probably keep it to those two teams right there and say we see an upseed at 4 or 5.
Let's look at the East region. Obviously, Duke is the 1 seed. We already talked about Mississippi State and Baylor in the 8-9 game. Obviously, Baylor has been here before. Oregon is the 5, Liberty the 12, Arizona the 4, Akron the 13, BYU the 6, VCU the 11, Wisconsin the 3, Montana the 14, St. Mary's the 7, Vanderbilt the 10, Alabama the 2, and Robert Morris the 15. You have already shared that we might be thinking of Wisconsin as an early victim of getting upset. We've already shared that you like VCU, so that's a really interesting pod from the way you're looking at it. What about the rest of this region? Do you like somebody in particular in kind of that Oregon, Liberty, Arizona, Akron range? Do you like anybody to upset Duke here? You talked about them dealing with their injuries. Is Alabama one of the stronger twos in your opinion? How do you evaluate this region?
Okay, so Oregon is always a team that I circle because of Dana Altman. Dana Altman, really, really good head coach when it comes to the against the spread numbers in the tournament. And so you put a circle there. You're always interested in hey, what's the line on Oregon and who are they playing and how are they able to get up for some of these games. And I think if they get past a Liberty team that's pretty good, they've played Arizona in years past. It wasn't just 2 years ago they were in the same conference. So I think that they could get up for a game going up against that
let me ask
Arizona
you
team.
quickly. Is Arizona maybe going to get upset because Tommy Lloyd has not been very good in the tournament? For as much regular season success as they've had under him, that has not translated to March.
Yeah, they lost as a 2 seed. Lost as a 2 seed. What was that, Princeton?
I think it was
That
Princeton.
year? Yeah, and so and they're playing Akron. Like Akron is the team that you did not want to go. You do not want to go up against when you're talking about a coach that struggles in the tournament and an Akron team that plays from behind. They've been comfortable playing from behind this year and not giving up in games, not giving up in games. So Akron against the spread numbers against Arizona is something that I'd be interested in. But I mean here. Duke, I think if they get Mississippi State and Chris Jansen, that defense, I think that they could scheme up something good, especially if Duke is compromised. They could scheme up something good, and then that would throw this whole region on its head. I could see a number of situations. I could see Alabama, of course, coming out of it as the 2 seed, and I think that's what I'm going to go with this. I'm going to go with Alabama. I think that they're going to be able to get it done. A little bit of a path of least resistance for them because I think that whether you get St. Mary's or Vanderbilt, they have familiarity with Vanderbilt. I think they can outshoot St. Mary's. On the other side, I told you I'm not confident in Wisconsin, and I think they can outplay offensively BYU and the high shooting offense and 3-point shooting that they have. So yeah, I think this is pretty comfortable with me going Alabama in this region.
If I asked you for an underdog, I'm assuming you would pick VCU, given what you've already said.
I mean, the Rams do struggle offensively, and when you get to an Alabama, you got to be all the way. So I wouldn't give them as my underdog all the way through. But yeah, I do think that they can make this game very competitive with BYU. I think they can beat BYU. And if you tell me they beat BYU and I have VCU in a game against Wisconsin, I'm 100% taking VCU. So yeah, maybe VCU can get me a little Sweet 16.
Nice little run there. All right, let's go to the Midwest. Houston is the 1 seed, as mentioned, going up against SIU Edwardsville. Then Gonzaga, the 8, and Georgia, the 9. Clemson is the 5. McNeese under Will Wade is the 12. Purdue, the 4. High Point, the 13. Illinois, the 6. They'll face the winner of Texas Xavier. I think it is. It's not on the bracket I'm looking at. Kentucky, the 3. Troy, the 14. UCLA, the 7. Utah State, the 10. That's an interesting one. And then Tennessee, the 2. And Wofford, you already mentioned, is the 15. I think the standout for most people looking at this is going to be, again, I kind of already alluded to this, but Gonzaga is a top 10 team on KenPom, according to the metrics. As a potential round 2 matchup for Houston, that's a tough one.
I feel very confident about Houston in that matchup.
Okay.
I think Houston defensively has the press, has the ability to speed Gonzaga up a little bit more than what they want to be offensively, especially in the half court, and get them turning the ball over. I think Houston will be able to offensive rebound that game. It's really just the size. And as long as Houston can combat the size, I think they have the guard play that, Gonzaga is so predicated on with Nembhard and all those guys over there. I think that they have the guard play that can play really, really well with them. I think Houston is I'm gonna have multiple brackets going over the course of this season, and there are 3 teams that I'm pretty confident that I'm gonna have winning. And there's Florida, Houston, and then I may, just in case I hate Duke into a title, I'll throw one with Duke in there. But really, really hoping the Duke one doesn't come through. But just in case I hate them, I'll throw one in there.
I am not somebody who has typically liked Brad Underwood or this Illinois team that much. Maybe that's because I'm a Maryland fan, and for whatever reason, Maryland owns Underwood. It's remarkable how often they beat him, even when they're less talented. But I do kind of like them against Kentucky if it gets to that point. I think it's a good matchup for them with the lack of defense you get from Kentucky. Like Illinois can run back and forth, and I think they can definitely outscore them. I like Tennessee a lot, kind of in their pod of 4. Down there, they're also just a really good team, obviously, as we talked about. So I kind of like Illinois to face Tennessee when they get to that point in the, I guess that would be the Sweet 16. The other kind of region of this region that I think is really fascinating is this Clemson, McNeese, Purdue, High Point range. Yeah. I think you can make a cogent case for any of those 4 teams. Exactly.
Yep. Any of those 4 teams can come out of there, and I would be like, all right, understood. It's March. Like, that's what happens. And, tough things. Like, Clemson is a team that we've seen them beat Duke. Like, when everybody thought Duke was unbeatable and there was nobody that was going to get in front of Duke, Clemson went in there, played them in a tough game, got them into what exactly I was talking about, a late game situation. That's what you want to get with Duke. Hey, just don't try to go out there and blow them out by 20 points in the beginning of the game. Hey, let's stick with them, keep it a close game, because when we get in a late game situation, that's where we execute and we can hope on the youthfulness of that Duke team. And Clemson was able to exploit that earlier this year when they got the win. And so, yeah, I think Clemson can go out there and beat anybody, but oh man, there's some power going on with Will Wade and McNeese right now. Did you see the manager for McNeese?
No,
on social media? Oh man, dude, he was sitting there. He had a social media video, and it was after they had won, and he was like, "Yeah, we're going dancing. Look at it." And he shows off his sweats, and it's got March Madness on his sweats. He's like, "Yeah, that's where we're going. See you next Sunday. Yeah." And he got an NIL deal with like Insomnia Cookies and Buffalo Wild Wings. Like, oh, this dude is electric. This is what March is about.
He's a great coach, too. I mean, like, obviously the reason he's at the level he is because of some of the stuff with paying players in past years before that was allowed. But, like, Will Wade is a very good basketball coach. I like McNeese a lot. And Purdue, like, listen, obviously they're not what they were last year without Zach Edey. Braden Smith is really darn good as well. High Point, not an easy matchup, though. I don't think so. Like, that's a really interesting again, any of these 4, Clemson, McNeese, Purdue, High Point, like, you could talk me into making a Sweet 16 run.
Watch High Point get a win outright against Purdue.
I mean, Purdue's been upset before in the tournament, right?
I hate, and I would hate it. It's so many times that Purdue has just gone into the tournament and laid an egg, and I think that watch High Point be the dog that everybody's playing. I'm sure by the time the end of the week gets here, High Point is going to be the dog that everybody's playing, because everybody's going to look at Purdue and being like, do I really want to lay that many points with Purdue? Nah.
Yeah. All right. What will keep us from Houston, Tennessee? Or are you saying it's going to be Houston, Tennessee in the Elite Eight?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Houston, Tennessee. I think this is going to be rather chalk Houston, Tennessee, and then Houston just has. I like Houston's offense a lot more. and I think that they're going to be a lot more consistent on offense, and the defense is going to do what it does. If they have the guard play to guard Lanier and guard Ziegler and really not let those guys be the guys that beat them. We'll see how the bigs are able to do and if they're able to counteract that in the game, but I think that those Houston guards are good enough defensively that they can take away the top two guard options for Tennessee and make this a really, really tough game.
I want to let everybody know that you can get your college basketball betting edge live. Join Matt Perrault and Terrell Furman Jr. every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on the BettingPros YouTube channel at youtube.com/bettingpros for expert NCAA tournament picks and betting breakdowns. Here are the best bets before the odds move. You guys will be doing that in a couple of days with some first-round bets, some of those first four bets. We're going to be doing that for every round and all tournament long with you two, so that will be something everybody wants to check out before they place their bets. All right, let's get to the West region. Florida is the 1 seed going up against Norfolk State. UConn the 8, obviously coming off back-to-back championships.
Hey, be careful about that Norfolk State team too. Put some respect on their name. They played a Tennessee team and lost by it was like 5 or 7 points or something like that. So
I almost paused when I read them to let you jump in because I knew.
So give that Norfolk State team some respect. I understand it's we got a lot in front of us right now, but they are going to come in. They're going to go play hard and they're going to cover the spread. Darn it, they are going to cover the spread against Florida. They played that Tennessee team tough.
What do you think that spread's going to be?
Oh, dude, it's probably something crazy. It's probably like 20.5.
The way Florida's playing, yeah.
Florida's one of my, I really, really think it's going to be tough to beat Florida.
I think they're so good. I think Todd Golden's a great coach. I really one of my really good friends is a Florida grad. I texted him the day they made that hire. I said he's going to take you to a Final Four in the first 3 or 4 years. I think he's really good.
And they have too many athletes. It's just like everybody on that team can score the basketball efficiently. They offensive rebound at one of the best in the nation, and all those offensive rebounds probably come back into 3-point shots made for that Florida team. It's just too much offense for anybody. I mean, we haven't even gotten through naming the rest of the bracket yet, but it's really hard for me not to think Florida's making out of this region.
Yeah, a lot of my Maryland fan friends were talking about we got to avoid Duke or we got to avoid Auburn. I was like, I want to avoid Florida. Nobody is playing better than them. And of course, we didn't avoid them. The 8 seed is UConn. The 9 is Oklahoma. The 5 seed Memphis. 12 seed Colorado State also playing very well right now. Maryland, of course, is the 4. Grand Canyon the 13. Mizzou is the 6. Drake the 11. That's a really interesting one. Texas Tech the 3. UNC Wilmington the 14. Kansas the 7. Arkansas the 10. St. John's the 2. Omaha the 15. First of all, at the bottom of this region, we might get Rick Pitino against John Calipari. That would be amazing. Something.
That would be amazing. I mean, the Italian-American Bowl that's going on in that game. Oh, man. It's going to be great. It is going to be great. We probably should get Tommy DeVito courtside for that one. We got to dig. What's my guy over there that head coach for Indiana? Head football coach.
Kurt
the
guy from JMU. Yes,
Kurt Signetti. We got to get Kurt Signetti over there. That would be a great game.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Kansas, of course. Bill Self and a lot of talent on that team. They could upset our Italian Bowl in the second round, but an interesting pod there. Obviously, Rick Pitino's done an amazing job at St. John's, and clearly legendary coach, arguably the best of all time. Some might say so. That'll be a really interesting area. Mizzou Drake, I think, is a really fun matchup. What do you make of that one?
Oh man, I mean, if Mizzou finds a way to score the basketball, then they'll win. But Drake's gonna play well defensively, and I think with the time to prepare and watching film and getting ready for this Mizzou team, I don't know if Mizzou's gonna be able to get that done. I mean, Drake has been the team I think all year people have talked about. Hey, they're gonna do something in the tournament. They're gonna do something in the tournament. I think now's the time that we're here, and we just got to get behind them. That Drake team, really, really something different defensively.
What do you think about UConn? I know I kind of skipped past them quickly, but again, they have won 2 straight titles. We know what Hurley can do as a coach. This is not the same UConn team. I mean, last year on this very show, I was asking our guest, is it UConn versus the field? That's how clear of a giant they were. Clearly not the case, obviously, right? They're an 8 seed now. Would you be scared if you're a Florida fan and you have to go up against UConn in round 2?
I don't think I am. I don't think I'm and I was talking with some buddies, and as the brackets drop, everybody's texting live reactions, and they're like, man, Florida, tough draw. And I'm like, well, if we just strip the name UConn from the team, and it's just Team A standing there, and I'm looking at, I'm like, well, I still think this Florida team can beat Team A, and they'll be really, really good. Like, I don't know if they have the bigs that are gonna be able to continuously battle with Florida down low in the paint over the course of the entire game, because Florida's cycling bigs in and out of the game. Like, they have so many options and gotten so much healthier, and so. I mean, Clayton, and you talk about Richard and all these other guys. Like, I think that they have so many offensive power, so many offensive weapons on that side of the ball, that no matter how good UConn is defensively, somebody really, really good is going to get their hands on a basketball and get a pretty good look at the basket. So I don't think UConn actually makes it a game at all. If you tell me Florida, UConn, I'm probably going to end up taking whatever points I have to lay with Florida and saying that they handle business here.
I do think I think Florida is good enough that it doesn't matter, but I do think this is a relatively tough draw, not because of UConn, but just this region as a whole is really strong. Even just looking at the coaching, look at how many former championship winners there are in this region. We just mentioned Hurley with UConn. Obviously, Calipari, Bill Self, Rick Pitino. Those three alone is remarkable. I think Texas Tech is an excellent 3 seed. Like,
luckily, Coach Cal coached himself out of it, and so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, but he obviously got the experience. I mean, I would say this. I think the 2, 3, and 4 seeds are stronger in the West than they are in any other region. I think St. John's, Texas Tech, Maryland, to me, is stronger than like Tennessee, Kentucky, Purdue. I like Tennessee. I don't really like Kentucky and Purdue all that much. You know, we talk like Wisconsin's a 3 in a different region. I know we like Alabama. Arizona is the 4. You know, Texas A&M is the 4 in another region. I think the region as a whole, even if not necessarily that matchup with UConn, I think the region as a whole is very strong. I know, like again, not to be homer, but like, people have talked about Maryland with their starting 5 as like a possible dark horse Final Four team. Probably not anymore, given that they're in the region with Florida, but there's just a lot of talent in this region and a lot of really good coaching. So it's a really strong one, and I think that could make for some upsets because there's so many good teams in terms of seeding, but maybe not upsets in terms of like the coaching matchup or anything like that. I do just have to say, like, I have to give a little analysis on Maryland because that's the team I care about most. Starting 5 is incredible. I'm not a big fan of Kevin Willard, so I really worry about his 2 tournament wins in his career, and it's been an 18-year career, so that's really concerning to me. We already mentioned how Grand Canyon like could be kind of a scary matchup for them, and they have 0 depth. Like, what? There is absolutely nobody on their bench to mention. In fact, there was a really interesting stat during the Big Ten tournament, and I knew this in my head, but I didn't realize how significant of a stat it was. They are the only team in the entire country to have every single player is either averaging over 11 points per game or under 4. There's no like bench piece who's averaging 6 points per game, 8 points per game. It is their starting 5 is all averaging a dozen per game, and it's a superb starting 5. They call it the Crab 5. They're awesome. Everybody else is totally useless at scoring the basketball. And if they get into foul trouble, how their game is officiated is going to be really meaningful for them. Because if they get into foul trouble, there's nobody who can come in and save them.
Oh, they're screwed.
It's over. It's absolutely over. So that's my thought on Maryland. I do like the matchup with Memphis if that is the 4 or 5 game we get in the second round. But like I said, we'll have to see if they even end up getting there. Is there an underdog in this region that you are eyeing? Or, I mean, I know you already said you're going to take Florida, but if you had to pick somebody else?
Yeah, Drake is I think Drake's really interesting in what they can. And the fact that if they get past Mizzou, they get potentially Texas Tech, who is amazing offensively and not a bad defensive team. Amazing offensively. If Drake can hold that Texas Tech team to under 70 points, oh man, I think Drake is definitely going to be in the conversation of, oh, they kept these games close, if not won these games outright, and we finally get that Missouri Valley madness in the tournament where they move on to a Sweet 16 round. So, yeah, I could see that Drake team definitely getting up for some games.
Who are some other dark horses you like for the Final Four in any region? So, not a 1 seed, not even a 2 seed, maybe not even maybe a 3 seed could count, but somebody that you would qualify as a dark horse that you would like to kind of highlight here.
It's got to be that Iowa State team. Still.
Iowa State, yeah.
Yeah, Iowa State would, even now with the fact that they're missing, I believe it's Gilbert, and not going to be able to play in this game, and so uh, in the tournament, but they still have Kurt. Like, I think that this is still a really good offense. They play really, really well. It's just the 3-point shooting. If they can defend a 3-point line a lot better than what they've done, especially against like BYU and some of these other teams in the past, then I think that they're going to be really, really lock solid and really, really good team. They played well in the out of conference. Like, I think that Iowa State is one of those teams that I'm looking at. And I'm like, okay, I could see them a 3 seed making it to the Final Four and being in there in the conversation, especially if you get past an Auburn or something weird happens with Auburn, then yeah, I could see Iowa State getting there.
Do you have any kind of Cinderella predictions? I know, double-digit seed, we'll say. I know we talked a little bit about High Point and McNeese. We talked about VCU as an 11, Yale as a 13, Grand Canyon as a 13. Do you have kind of a favorite Cinderella or two?
It's a few of them out here. I'm very interested. So a lot of those times, some of those teams from the first 4 games will go in there and they'll be able to go up and get up and go and get on a run. I know VCU 2011 first 4 was able to go out and make a run. We saw UCLA make it to the Final Four out of the first 4, and they made a run. So, as I look at the first 4 games, and if there was a team that was, I really just don't want to believe that North Carolina has it in them. But they were good out of conference, and I think that's the thing that pulled them in is how good North Carolina was out of conference earlier in the year. So if North Carolina decides to try to go on a run now, I think the tough thing is that even if they get out of this round, they're playing an Ole Miss team, and the SEC beat up on the ACC this year in the SEC ACC Challenge. So we'll see about that. But I'm looking towards the first 4 games. Maybe we get a Texas that comes out of there, and Texas got really, really hot in that SEC tournament, so maybe a Texas comes out of there because, like you said, I'm a little bit iffy on Illinois right now, and if they're gonna be able to play well, and then if they get another matchup with Kentucky and the SEC rivalry, like that could potentially go either way. Maybe they get up, maybe they lose to that Kentucky team. So not too many Cinderellas outside the ones that we highlighted. I do like High Point. I think they could be fun. McNeese possibly could be really fun. Everybody knows that I'm going to be cheering for my VCU Rams. Watch out for Vanderbilt, who had a really good season this year. So I think there's a number of teams, and I hate to say it, but that Maryland team really does struggle in the tournament, man. Like, they really do. I blindly told myself I was going to fade Maryland in the tournament. And so if Grand Canyon just needs one to get them going, then maybe they do.
Terrell, Maryland won the national championship in 2002. Do you know how many Sweet 16s they've made since then?
How many Sweet 16s have they made since 2002? 2.
You went too high. They've made one.
One Sweet 16.
And by the way, it was the Turgeon year where they were the number 2 team preseason with Diamond Stone and Melo Trimble and Robert Carter, and they didn't even do anything with that. They were terrible. That the best they did was they got to the Sweet 16 and got blown out in the Sweet 16. They're not good in the tournament.
They got to be careful because that Grand Canyon team also plays really good defensively. And if this is an ugly, grinded out defensive game between these two teams, and it's just like whoever gets on that last run goes, and plus, Grand Canyon's a pretty solid offensive rebounding team as well. So,
my Maryland fan friends think that I want them to lose because I don't like Willard. I want them to win, right? I would love nothing more than to be incorrect, but I just don't think Willard has the stuff for March.
Yeah.
And they're talking about extending him, which, by the way, was a very difficult piece of news for me to read earlier today. But yeah, they just, and also the fact they're playing in Seattle, not going to be easy to
travel spot.
Maryland's worst game of the entire season was their loss at Washington this year. They're not a team that travels well. So they only lost by 6 because they didn't have any blowouts this year, but they looked awful in that game, and Washington is not good. So that really concerns me, and I don't think you're wrong about that. Any players that we didn't highlight that you think could maybe kind of jump out throughout the course of this month? I mean, we always see some of these guys were already stars, but the Shabazz Napier, the Kemba Walker, kind of led you kind of those runs. Marquise Noel a couple years ago for Kansas State. Anybody stand out to you that you think we could be really excited to talk about for the next few weeks?
Oh, man, I feel like it's a lot of guys. You talked about Cam Jones over there, Marquette. Got to shout out my guy Shaka Smart one time. We talk about Kurt over there in Iowa State. I mean, it's a bunch of players. Some of the smaller schools got a lot of dogs. Max Shulga, VCU, I think that's going to be a good one. We talked about Grand Canyon and Maryland. They got a guy down there in Grand Canyon Grant Foster, who's been really, really good. And I think that he may be able to give them a game and make a little name for himself. So I think it's a lot of players that I'm interested in.
I really like Marquette, honestly. I would not be surprised if we're sitting here a few weeks from now and saying, Michigan State, they didn't have enough star power. They had a lot of depth, but they didn't have enough star power. Iowa State dealing with the injury. If we're sitting here a couple weeks from now and Marquette's in that Elite Eight game, I don't know if I'm going to put in my bracket. I would not be surprised. Cam Jones is a baller.
Shaka's got to get over that monkey off his back in the tournament. Shaka has not performed well in the NCAA tournament. Trust me, as a guy that is a fan of Shaka Smart, after he took VCU from that 11 seed all the way to the Final Four 2011, he hasn't replicated the same success in a long time. And so, very, very, I'm always iffy about Marquette when it gets to the tournament. But I mean, Cam Jones is just a dog. Like, he is an absolute dog, and he was going out there and he fought everything he could in that Big East title game and really throughout the whole Big East tournament. So there's a number of players. I think Drake has a couple of guys in there that are going to be really, really good for the tournament as well.
Any other kind of final overarching thoughts on the tournament before we get out of here? Anything that we haven't hit on, or just kind of general thoughts about what this tournament, some tournaments are a little more chalk heavy than usual. Others, you get a lot more upsets. Just kind of any final thoughts?
I think that we've seen years past where a lot of the underdogs come through, especially early rounds. And I think this is another one. There's a number of underdogs here that I think can make teams competitive, at least games competitive. Maybe not get the outright, but maybe I'm betting on them against the spread. Like I said, I had that Wofford basketball team circled. Like, oh man, this team is red hot right now, and they're going into a matchup against a very, very tough Kentucky team, and that wasn't the draw you wanted. But like, even UNCW, we didn't talk about them on this show that much going up against Texas Tech. Everybody assumes Texas Tech is getting out of there easy, but this UNCW team, first tournament appearance since 2017, they felt very, very slighted going into their conference tournament. They put on a really big run and they got out of it. They could be somebody that makes some noise. Arkansas is getting Boogie Flan back from injury, so they're going to be playing full strength against a Kansas team. We got to see what that looks like. Arkansas is a 10 seed here. Like, there's some teams here that I'm like, all right, we could actually see something going, because Calipari, he may not be the best X's and O's coach, but when you give him the talent and how they play defensively all year long, they just got to get hot at the right time, and that Arkansas team might be able to make a run. So there's a number of teams that I'm looking at that I'm like, hey, things could fall their direction, and they could be a 10, 11, 12 seed that's making it a little bit further than people thought.
Let's wrap up with our shoot from the hip gut reaction Final Four picks. We reserve the right to change these between now and the start of the tournament on Thursday. We've kind of sprinkled them in throughout talking about the regions, but just officially our Final Four picks here. What do you got for us?
Let's go with Florida coming out of the West region. We're going to take Auburn coming out of the South. We are going to, I'm not officially giving out the Dukies. What do you mean? Give me Alabama getting out of the Eastern region. And then I'm sticking with my Houston pick coming out of the Midwest. National title game, give me Houston versus Florida.
So here's my problem. My gut reaction to giving my Final Four picks is Florida, it's Auburn, it's Alabama, and it's Tennessee. I refuse to give 4 SEC teams. It's not going to be that in the Final Four. So I have to shake it up somewhere, which means I'm going – the one I feel like I most want to change up from that group is Alabama. So I'm going to go with Duke, even though I kind of do like Bama. I just can't go 4 SEC teams. I also just I hate Duke so much that I know it's what's going to happen is they're going to win because I don't want them to. And they are obviously an insanely good team when healthy. If the lineup is right – there's a reason they're number one on Ken Pom. And there's actually even a gap. We talk about how strong those other 3-1 seeds are historically. There's a gap between Duke and those guys too. Against the ACC, I get it. Injury stuff, I get it. But obviously a super talented team and would not be surprised. So I'll say Duke against Tennessee. I'll say Tennessee beats Duke. I'm going to say Tennessee makes the title game here on my shoot from the hip.
Oh, Rick Barnes making it all the way to the title game? This isn't the regular season? This isn't the regular season?
It is dangerous. I'll say Florida over Auburn, and then I'll say Florida wins it all. I just think nobody's playing better than Florida right now.
Yeah, man. I got Florida over Houston in the title game, but I'm going to have a bet on Houston, man. I think Houston's got some value. Yeah. And if Houston, if we get some upsets here or there and the path opens up, Houston is going to look way better than whatever set plus 750 they are right now.
Yeah. We're going to dive into more of some of our betting futures in the coming days. You guys, like I said, you and Pearl are going to break down some of the first round matchups here in the weekend, and we'll be chatting again kind of each week leading up into each weekend for the next 3 weeks of the tournament. So there is a lot more college basketball talk to come, a lot more March Madness to come. Enjoy this week of filling out your brackets, everyone, because it is, like I said, super fun to quibble with all of your picks, and just, you can dream big every single year. It's the hope springs eternal for sure. Great talking to you, Terrell. Best of luck to VCU. Hopefully best of luck to Maryland as well. For Terrell, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.